What up? What up? What up? Hello and welcome everyone to this 30-second episode of the Backwards K Baseball Podcast. I'm your host Chris Asbrock, and I am joined once again each and every episode by my co-host Scott Kaiser. Scott, my man, how you doing, buddy?
What's going on, my man? Another week in the books, another week closer to the season starting. I am digging getting baseball updates on my phone again. It's good stuff.
Dude, I know it's kind of nice getting blown up at like 3 p.m. Just seeing all these spring training updates. It's awesome, man. It's great.
Yeah, no, I enjoy it. Although there are some times I need to adjust my my alerts because it'll be like, all right, I don't think I needed to know that because I have them set to the high frequency, and it's fine when the games start. They go back, but during spring training with all the movement, there's certain times of the day it gets to be a little much. But it's all good. It means we're at a good space, and we're much closer to baseball being played that counts. And warmer weather. Like it was nice to be able to feel my face when I walked outside today. So I'll take that.
I know. I actually walked outside in short sleeves at one point today. I haven't been able
And
to do that
didn't die.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and wasn't completely punished by Mother Nature, so it was kind of nice. First time
Gotta
for,
love
for
it.
everything, man. No kidding, no kidding.
Well, and the countdown is on. I think spring's starting here in the next 10 days, like unofficially. Like the meteorologist tell me that spring will start in like 10 days, but you know.
Yeah, we're in that medium point where it's what they call like fake spring, I think already, and we're back to another winter is how that chart says or whatever. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and we spring forward. Is it this coming Sunday or the Sunday after that?
Oh, I don't know. Good question. I haven't really paid attention to that.
Yeah, it's coming up because I remember seeing something and I'm like, wait, that's soon. Like either the 2nd or the 8th, one of the two. So first or second weekend of March. But either way, we got baseball to talk about. So let's go on ahead and get into it before we go too far down the spring conversation. We're talking American League Central Division tonight. We did the American League East last week, so this week we will talk about the Central, which we kind of touched on last week just ever so briefly, and I didn't really think about it because I had referenced talking about this division last week. And it's kind of fitting that here we are because I think this is one of the more interesting divisions just by virtue of the fact that the teams are all so similar, but they suffered defeat at the hands, despite 3 of the teams making it. They suffered defeat at the hands of multiple different teams in the playoffs. Didn't quite make it as far as the World Series. Cleveland got close, making to the ALCS against the Yankees after beating after the Twins, or after the Royals rather had been knocked out by the Yankees. So a good showing in all, and the upstart Tigers also making it in and losing the first round as well. They lost to KC, ironically enough. So a little bit of cannibalism going on there in the AL Central, but very good young teams. Cleveland always in the conversation. Chicago historically bad. We'll talk about them here in a second, but overall, a fun upcoming division, and at least for the time being, not the doormats of Major League Baseball as the American League Central tends to be.
Yeah, it's actually kind of nice to see, 3 or 4 teams that are, really worth something and not, complete dog crap like we've
we've come accustomed to.
Sox, but yeah, exactly. It's always been a division
that's in a perpetual rebuild.
Yeah, well, and that's true. But I mean, the AL Central's always been. It seemed like really a one-horse race for the last like decade, is what it seems like. And then, because you had a little bit of of a run with the Royals. 2015, 2016. I want to say back during that time there. I can't remember the exact years, but that's within that 10-year time frame. But really, this has been the division of the Guardians/Indians, and they've run the show. And now, last couple of years, it's been kind of nice to see, other teams step up and really, make a push, for the playoffs and even the division. So,
well, let's get started talking about Chicago. As we mentioned, Chicago, one of the worst teams in the league, not just the Central Division, but actually in Major League history. They tied the modern day record for losing in a season, nearly set the record. But it just not a whole lot to say about Chicago. They traded away everything that wasn't nailed down. We talked about Garrett Crochet last week getting traded from the White Sox to the Red Sox. So gone as their ace. They no longer they've gotten rid of the likes of Jordan, or not Jordan, of Jan Moncada over at third base, who was once seen as the future there. Injury prone, disappointing tenure there. He's now with the Angels. Still there as Luis Robert. He was one of the big three at one point, but much talk about him getting traded in the offseason, and one would expect that between now and the trade deadline, if Robert isn't hurt like he tends to be so often, he will find his way out of Chicago. A lot of young guys, a lot of high name prospects and whatnot. But as far as 2025 goes, not expecting a whole lot out of the White Sox, are we, Chris? It's just going to be more of the same, a season of expected and hopeful growth if you were a fan of the Southside Chicago team.
Yeah, a team that finished 41 and 121. 51 and a half games back. I mean, that's
51 and a half games back.
51 and a half games back is staggering to me. Just looking at the standings, I mean, my God, they had a 253 winning percentage. So,
wow, gosh.
Yeah, when you actually look at the numbers, I mean, they were 41 games back of the Twins. Like, my God, it's incredible to go back and read what, standing wise, where they were. But surely to God, the White Sox are not going to be as bad as they were last year. They did make some additions. Most recently, Joey Gallo on a minor league deal. So, okay, you got a 31-year-old, infield out or first baseman, outfielder. What we do on that part, but that's
back up real quick though. I think the revelation there is that Joey Gallo is only 31. Say what?
Well, that's true. And then you look at Michael A. Taylor, who
was super old at this point. Feels like he's been around forever.
I know. It does. I mean, it really does. You sit there and you just think of. I mean, in baseball years, he during his time in New York, he aged like hell. So
yeah.
Back before then, he was a spry, youngin' with the Rangers, and then aged pretty poorly with the Yankees. But 31 years old, first baseman, outfielder, minor league deal. Again, it's a guy who's going to provide depth. There you go. Michael A. Taylor was brought in on a 1-year contract. Brandon Drury, 32-year-old infielder, another depth move. Again, minor league deal. They brought in a lot of guys on minor league deals or even 1-year deals to really, just kind of get them through this year until they start to bring on all of these, all this young talent that they have and they've acquired via trade and everything like that. It's going to be a long couple of years, we know. But we did talk about it a couple episodes, previously that this could have been a much quicker rebuild. I think if they had dealt some of the pieces for major league talent as opposed to, the prospect route, I'm okay with it. How they've gone about it, but it's still going to be the next couple of years are going to be pretty rough in the South Side. Again, 41 and 121. It's not going to be that bad. But it's still not going to be pretty. They're a team that's going to be, once again, sitting in the basement of the American League Central.
Yeah, I don't see much different outcome as far as place of finishing, but just by virtue of rolling out of bed and playing baseball, they can't be nearly as bad as 121 losses. Like, I can't imagine this team, setting setting the modern day record or contending to set the modern day record for losses in a season again. So they will be improved, but it's going to be a lot of growing pains. If you're a fan of prospects and if you're a fan of just watching guys trying to get better, you're going to see a whole lot of that on the south side of Chicago. Because any of the
we've got the team for you.
Right. Any of the names that you might know now, they did sign Martin Perez to be part of their rotation. All of those guys will 99% chance that they'll be gone by the trade deadline, if not before, assuming they're not injured along the way. But those guys are just to provide depth, provide a chance to maybe recoup some value later on in the season, and just kind of keep things stable so that it's not legit just a team full of prospects and minor leaguers. There's got to be some players on the major league roster that have experience yet. So, but more or less, this is a quadruple A franchise in the midst of an MLB landscape. They will definitely be not favored in probably any of the games that they played this season.
Yeah, I can't imagine so. No, quick question: how would you have handled the off season different, like in terms of rebuild and everything like that, or would you go about it the way they have?
I actually am fine with the way that they're doing things right now. We didn't talk about the fact that they switched managers last year and ended the season with Grady Sizemore as their interim manager. And then what form they hired a former player, and now I'm blanking it. Was it Orlando Cabrera? It's a former. It is a former player. Let me look that up real quick. But they hired a new manager, and so we don't know, how that's gonna work out long term, but at least they've set a foundation. So you get the new manager in there, you clean house as far as it's Will Venable. Will Venable is
that's right. Okay.
So first year manager, right? was playing not that long ago.
Yeah.
So he'll be able to connect with those younger guys and hopefully get them set in the right direction. But yeah, I'm perfectly fine with the way they're going about it because they didn't bring any guys in tied down to long-term contracts. Everybody in the world knew they were going to have to trade Garrett Crochet. I think they got a great return package from Boston for him. They didn't get undersold. And importantly for them, even though they do need to turn the page from Luis Robert, they didn't just settle in a trade for him. They didn't just give him away. Like, I'm not a huge Luis Robert guy. I think between injuries, lack of hustle, I'm just not a big fan of him. But there's talent there, and obviously, there's plenty of teams that would take the shot on him for a very low price in a trade. But I do think he's got enough talent that it warranted not just giving away just to give him away. But at some point, I do think that he'll net a decent enough return for them, and they'll have to move on because he's not going to be around for this rebuild. And there's questions about whether or not, I don't want to say quit is a harsh word, but that maybe he gave less than full effort last year in a lost season, a season where they were just getting demolished day after day. So, I mean, again, talented player, but not the type of guy that you want to keep long term, especially around this. You're trying to build things. You're trying to keep things moving in a positive direction. Young, impressionable guys learning how to be major leaguers. You don't want anybody that can be a negative influence for them. So I think it's best for them to get rid of Robert sooner rather than later, but good on them for not just taking whatever deal anybody threw at them this offseason, because I'm sure they got plenty of low ball offers, no doubt.
Oh, I mean, that was the thing. And you heard the demand, from the Reds that, from what they were asking, Nick Krall for. And I mean, the Reds weren't going to, I wouldn't have done I wouldn't have done it either. But I mean, when you got a player who is going to be your last big chip that you can deal,
mm-hmm.
I mean, you got to do what you got to do to try and, I don't want to say get a king's ransom, but, ultimately that's your goal in every deal, is to fleece the other side, because you want,
sure.
I mean, that's just how it is. But,
right.
This was just, the Reds have the prospects to make it work. They just weren't going to give up as many prospects as, the White Sox were wanting. And that's okay. But it's just, it's hard, when your team is historically bad like this to, see that there is a small light at the end of the tunnel. And it's a very small, dim, tiny light at the end of this tunnel. It's just going to take forever to get there, it seems like. But, I had mentioned it could take, on a quicker rebuild part of it, but,
yeah, it
is what it is.
As a fan of a team that had to do this not that long ago, as far as like tear it down to like the absolute studs and kind of start over from scratch, baseball's in a little different place because, as you know, they don't do you can't get the number one pick in the draft by tanking anymore, and there's limits
and I like
on
that.
how. Yeah, I do too. It's incentive for
that.
you not to get in the trash, but it does slow down the potential time and make it so that if you're a team like the White Sox, now you got to hit. You got to hit on your draft picks. You got to hit on your trades to make sure that the rebuild timeline doesn't continue to get pushed back because of the mistakes that you make in scouting, trading, drafting, whatever it may be. So, I would tell White Sox fans to hang in there, and that it's going to be rough in the beginning, but assuming that the people in charge make the right decisions with players along the way, and there's going to be some misses because that's just how it goes when you're when you're casting a wide net, because that's what the White Sox will do. They will bring in just a ton of guys and prospects and all that, and some will work spectacularly, and some will some of the ones that you expect will work out great will flame out. But that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
But if all things go how they tend to go, if they go the right way, I would say in 3 years you'll be looking at a team that can compete at least in the Central Division. And the good news is, historically, this is a division that's not very hard to turn things around in. They are not playing in the AL East, so they have the luxury of the other teams are just as kind of cash strapped. They're they have the same limitations as far as budget and whatnot, so they don't have to worry about, well, we've got to everything has to go right and we've got to outspend all these guys. It's like, no, the Royals are just coming out of a very similar rebuild period. Cleveland is always kind of in the conversation, but they take steps back, and I think this year might be one of them, just based on some of the moves that they did. They'll still be in contention, but they have some down years as far as their standards go, and this could be one. But they at least have that to look forward to, is that the road could potentially be shorter. So Scott has a good question here. He said he's a few minutes behind, but he wants to know, who's the White Sox best starting pitcher, and can you name two? I named Martin Perez. He probably qualifies as their best pitcher, and no, I cannot name another one.
Nope, I can't either. Martin Perez was my other one.
So that's how things are on the South Side. It's just like, you better learn to speak prospect, buddy, because that's what you get. You better make sure you get a media guide when you go to the games to learn the names.
You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna look that up real quick. We're gonna look at the depth chart because we can, and I'm curious because this is gonna be intriguing as hell.
Well, they did have Drew Thorpe. Drew Thorpe was I know a name that they that is supposed to be part of this rebuild, but he struggled last year in his limited time in the bigs.
And that's
he'll be in the rotation again.
It's amazing. The White Sox are 0-3 in spring training, so they just continue to hits just keep on coming. My God.
There's only one state we know, and that's losing.
Let's see. So their pitchers are okay. I'm just going to name all: Justin Anderson, Prelander Baroa, Cam Boozer, Sean Burke. Now this is all bullpen as well, too. These aren't.
Yeah. Well, when you said Prelander Baroa, I'm like, okay, well, you're just reading the whole pitching staff. Got it.
Yeah, Cam Boozer, Sean Burke, Jonathan Cannon, Juan Carrella, Jake Eder, Brandon Eisert, Fraser Ellard, Tyler Gilbert, Wickelman Gonzalez.
Wickelman
Jairo
Gonzalez.
Wickelman Gonzalez.
That's a hell of a
Jordan
name.
Leisure. Oh, I do know one. Penn Murphy.
Okay.
But he's not a starter. He's a bullpen piece. But what the hell?
Yeah.
Jairo Iriarte. Davis Martin. I know Davis Martin. Nick Nastrini.
Nick Nastrini. Okay, I know that name.
Yeah. Drew Thorpe, Shane Smith, Jared Schuster, Gus Varland. I know Gus Varland.
Yeah, Jared Schuster, former Brave, and Gus Varland. All right, we're getting to the names that I've at least heard of.
Owen White and Bryce Wilson. I know Owen White.
Bryce Wilson, I know, another former Brave. So yeah, I mean,
that's all we got.
Yeah,
oh man,
it's pretty jaggy. It is pretty jaggy. And again, just a lot of guys that have prospect pedigree or they hope to be part of that rebuild. So, long road ahead, but hopefully Chicago can keep it on track.
They've looking at their roster here. They've got some guys that, just kind of going through that you could definitely see being dealt at the deadline. Andrew Benintendi, completely forgot he was on the White Sox.
Yeah, I relearned that earlier this afternoon when I was doing research for the show. I'm like, that's right. They did sign him last offseason, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like
it might have been last off. Yeah,
free agent off-season signing.
Austin Slater's one that you can see go. Mike Tauchman, who they just signed this offseason, and Michael A. Taylor. And obviously, you've got Luis Robert, but they've got guys that they can bring back some solid pieces.
Yeah,
but man, my God, that just you trying to name that pitching staff. Holy
Dorian
hell.
wants to know if the White Sox have the worst owner in the league, or does that go to the A's? I would say that Jerry Reinsdorf is up there.
Yeah, I was just you took the words out of my mouth. He's up there.
Yeah, he's
up there.
He's in a contender for top worst owners in the league. Yeah, you could make that argument. I don't know if he would walk away with the title.
No, he won't. No, he won't.
I would say the A's these days are probably public enemy number one, just with the way that everything's gone down there and being forced out of. But that being said, it's one of those like only avoiding being called a supervillain because somebody else is more evil. So it's not like Reinsdorf is a good owner.
Yeah,
just so
he's not getting a pass. It's okay.
Absolute worst. Yeah.
He's a crab sandwich with cheese. There you go.
There you go. I like that. A crab sandwich, but with cheese. All right, let's move on now to let's head up to Cleveland. Cleveland won the division last year. Again, we mentioned that they made it all the way to the ALCS where they would come up short against the Yankees. Returning quite a bit of the team, but they did trade away Josh Naylor. He's now in Arizona. We talked last show about how they got rid of a Shaw. They're out in center field. He's now in Toronto. They'll get back Shane Bieber, who early last season was injured and had to have Tommy John. He should be back at the halfway point. Big piece of that rotation. Obviously, they have Jose Ramirez, who's a consummate MVP candidate, and Steven Kwan. They did bring back Carlos Santana, former Cleveland great and fan favorite there. I think they're in a good spot. Cleveland, again, in this division, it's hard to lose much ground, even with losing some of the pieces. I just don't know what to expect from them on offense. And Cleveland does this thing where every other year it feels like they have an offense that really super struggles. I don't think getting rid of Josh Naylor will help that any. But I also don't think that they'll struggle so much that it's going to matter too much. Again, in this division, they should still be able to muster runs and it's still my pick to probably win this division. Your thoughts on Cleveland, Chris?
I'm with you. I think they're in the best position right now to continue, their playoff ways. They brought in guys, that are, familiar, to them, like you had said. They're just they're just always there, and it just. Of course, naturally, my computer just wants to freeze up here, so it kind of makes it a little bit tough. Um, so I was like halfway through some of the moves, and I'm like, oh great. But again, with the with the moves that that they have made, Cleveland, they're not one that's going to go out there and make the blockbuster deal. They just make solid moves each and every year. It seems like, and they've already got a solid, they've already got a solid roster. Period. And you're just going to continue to add to it. A team that made the ALCS last year, won the division by 6.5 games. They were 92-69. Again, lost to the Yankees and a pretty compelling series. It was fun to watch. Unfortunately, I mean, they obviously couldn't get it done, but I think they're the team in the best position to, to stay where they are and continue to push deep into the postseason. Just because, again, it's the stability of that franchise is what makes Cleveland so special. There's just, again, it's nothing blockbuster out there, but it's they've got dudes. And, guys like Jose Ramirez, again, you've got Stephen Kwan, those are the two big names. The Justin Bieber, Jesus Christ. Shane Bieber deal. Holy shit, man. Good Lord. Wow. See?
It wouldn't be the first time that he's been called that mistakenly or on purpose, so I think you're all right.
Well, that's true, but I checked, he's not a pitcher for the Guardians. Jesus Christ.
Oh. But anyway, Shane Bieber, you were saying.
That was a deal that I thought, I was stunned that he went back to Cleveland. I thought and personally, I said it kind of all along, I thought he was going to follow Tito to Cincinnati, which I thought would have been a perfect deal. But he returns back to Cleveland, and once he's fully healthy, you know what you're going to get from Shane Bieber. So that's just another stable piece in that rotation. Cleveland, again, I keep saying Cleveland's Cleveland. They're, they bring in guys, and one guy who I think has the potential to really make a name for himself as well. He was acquired back in the deal. I think it was the Naylor deal with Arizona. They got back Slade Ciccone, 26-year-old starter. I think there's so much potential with him, and it's a move that he's going to flourish. I think in Cleveland. I mean, it's just you add him. They brought in John Means last week. I know on a 1-year deal. Another move I do like is Jacob Junis. He was with the Reds last year towards the end. He was a guy that I think, adds so much to a bullpen as well. I'm looking here at all these moves that they have made. And I'm like, man, they brought in some really solid talent again on 1-year deals or even a minor league deal where they can prove themselves, like one of the minor league deals, for spring training type situation. Cleveland, they seem to get it right every year. And, man, more teams need to aspire to be like the Cleveland Guardians with the way they handle their business, because it seems like they continuously get it right. And when they fall back, like you said, if they have a bad year, it's for 1 year? They're never in a consistently bad spot.
Yeah, they're down.
And that's
are infrequent, but you were talking about more teams being like that. It's like they have done a really good job at developing their own pitching, and that is what has really helped them stay in that like contending pretty much all the time windows. They're able to identify pitchers and groom them through their system and get them to come up and have success. I love Tanner Bybee coming into this year. Gavin Williams struggled a little bit last year after, he had a taste 2 years ago, but I think he's got a bright future. And if Tristan McKenzie can get back to being healthy, we know what he could do. He's like, now it'll be 3 seasons now removed from having a really stellar year, but he's got all the talent in the world. It's been a bit of a struggle for him staying healthy the last few years. So I still really like their rotation. You said they had we should mention that Andres Jimenez also ended up in Toronto in a separate deal from the Miles Straw one. So there's like there. So I mean, no doubt about it, they lost, some offensive pieces that contributed to their offensive success last year. So they will take a step back there. But again, too much talent, too many homegrown pieces, too much of an organizational reputation for being able to make a team like this look good. I think they'll be right there, and I imagine that they'll finish at the top of the AL Central. They're my pick to represent them in the playoffs for certain. Moving on to the next team on the list, that's Detroit, who surprised all of us to a certain degree last year, because while we thought they would make strides and make improvements and play much better, they not only did that, they ended up making the playoffs. Despite the fact that they continue to be dogged by the contract that they signed at shortstop with God, why am I blanking? From Chicago.
Dipshit. What's his name?
Dipshit is a very good.
Oh my God, what is his name?
He's so bad. Yeah, he's so bad that
I can't stand him. Like I look at him, he pisses me off.
Well,
oh my gosh.
Despite the fact that they have him bogging them down at shortstop with one of the larger albatross, Javier Baez, there we go.
Javier Baez,
weighing them down at shortstop. They were able to beat the Cy Young Award winner Tariq Skubal, nearly won the Triple Crown there. Offense clicked. Younger guys they expect to produce. Riley Green was able to stay healthy, had himself a solid year. They brought in Gleyber Torres to play second base. I don't think that is all that spectacular. He's a big nothing burger as far as I'm concerned. And they brought back Jack Flaherty, who they had last year to start the season. He played really well, pitched really well to start the season. And then even though the Tigers ended up making the playoffs, he was dealt before the deadline to the Dodgers, and it didn't affect Detroit one bit. They kept on rolling, and they were still able to make the playoffs. So Jack Flaherty returns to Detroit. They'll be hoping to recapture that magic. And then, they got more guys coming. Jackson Jobe is a highly touted prospect who's about to get his first real taste of the bigs. He had a cup of coffee at the end of the last season, but looks like he's poised to end up in the rotation. They still have Casey Mize. Reese Olson looked great last year. He got hurt, but he's a promising young pitcher. And, the Tigers are a team that should be able to contend again this year, despite not making any huge moves, more just like kind of housekeeping moves. But they took a step forward, and the run of success that they had last year was really good for this young core. They now know what it takes to, get there. And even though they got knocked out in the first round, I think they're going to be right back in the conversation this year. They might not necessarily have the same amount of success, but I look for continued growth. And even if they don't necessarily end up in the playoffs, it's still going to be a team that other teams are going to have a problem with most of the year. So I like the Tigers. They're currently in a fun phase, and I'll be looking forward to seeing what they do this year to continue their growth. Chris, your thoughts on what the Tigers got cooking up in Detroit?
They've got a good thing going. Imagine what they, what could have been had they brought in Alex Bregman. Bregman was, that's where I figured he was going to go. He was the absolute perfect fit, for Detroit. But again, you see what they were able to accomplish last year, and what they have, coming into this, this upcoming season. Tarek Skubal's the guy. He's, Cy Young Award winner. What more can you say? It's going to come down to, these guys got to step up and produce again for another year. And I'm talking about Spencer Torkelson, Gleyber Torres, on the infield. And obviously, we talk about Javi Baez. Dude, he's just, a contract that you're stuck with. And for a guy who's just not lived up to any of it. And, if he can figure out how to, get his head out of his ass, then they might have a chance, to really do some, damage. But with him, it's tough. But you got to rely on guys to really take that next step. In terms of the rotation, like you had talked about, another guy I don't think I heard you mention, Kenta Maeda is a guy that.
Oh yeah, I love Kenta Maeda.
Yeah, I mean that was when they brought him in, it was like okay, that it was kind of a. It was like a head turner a little bit. Like, oh wow, okay, I see what Detroit's doing, and he's a pitcher that can be a perfect number 2 or number 3. In this rotation, if he lives up to his talent, but again, in terms of the outfield, you look at what they've got, Riley Green, like you had mentioned, Matt Vierling, Kerry Carpenter, they've got some guys, Parker Meadows.
Oh, Parker Meadows. I like Parker Meadows a lot.
I do too. I mean, they've got some dudes, and it's just a matter of these guys really taking the next step and building off of what they had last year. I mean, last year was successful. They made the playoffs. Boom, roll with it. And, just continue to put one foot forward, in front of the other. And that's what you keep doing with a team like this. And you've got the perfect mix, in my opinion, of the veteran talent with the young talent. They've got that. It's a great blend. And it would have been capped off with the Alex Bregman deal had they been able to pull it off. I believe they offered him more from what I thought I saw.
They did, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. And then, I mean, just imagine what that could have been. So I feel bad for him. It sucks that they were unable to bring him in, but it's not from lack of trying. But this is a team that, I'm kind of going back and forth on them on where they're going to finish, but I've got them 2 and 3.
I like Alex Bregman. And I think it would have been, it wouldn't have been a bad signing for Detroit, but I think they actually might end up looking back on the fact that he didn't sign as a good thing, because I don't know that he necessarily plays well for that team in that ballpark. It's such a huge ballpark.
It is a huge ballpark. Yeah.
And I don't know if, where Bregman's at in his career, how he will age for that ballpark. And so I think that the fact that he turned down the money that they were offering, and I think the rumors were that it was somewhere around $210 million.
Wasn't it like 6 years too, or something like that?
Yeah, it was 6 years, and that's a long. It is. It's a long time, and Bregman's a little bit older, and I think that the Tigers need to kind of weigh. You do need to bring in guys to supplement like the core and everything.
Yeah,
and I get what they're doing, but it's like, I don't think that it would have been looked at as like a Javi Baez situation, but they would definitely kind of regret that, I think, 3 years in. And so,
I was going to say a 3-year high AAV would have been spot on for them.
Right. Yeah. And I honestly, at the end of the day, but knowing that they offered the most money, they did everything they could. If Bregman didn't want to be there, and that's what he told you by turning down the money, then you're better off for it. Like you don't want a guy who just takes the bag and then gets there and is miserable. The team suffers for it. You end up either having to eat the money and trading him or cutting him later on. And so,
Javi Baez.
Right. And so, while it would have, in the short term, I think it would have been good. He would have been reunited with AJ Hinch there, who I think is doing a great job with this Tiger team and is a big reason why they are what they are right now and will hopefully continue to succeed into next year. But it would have been fun in the short term, but I think long term that deal wouldn't have worked out well for Detroit. So I think they might have dodged a bullet on that one. I think they finished third in this division.
I agree. That's where I had them.
And again, I think they record wise, they might finish with a better record, but I don't know if I don't really think that 3 teams are going to get in from this division. So it means they'll end up on the outside looking in, despite the fact that I think they'll get better as a team. This
is the division that's going to take the hit playoff wise.
Yeah.
Because of what we saw out of the American League East.
Yep.
This offseason. That's what it comes down to.
They are the ones that suffer because there's no way that 3 of them are getting in with the way that the AL East is constructed. So we're looking at 2 teams, and I think Detroit finishes behind the team we'll be talking about here in just a moment. So,
yeah, I'm with you.
Alrighty, but that means we can move on then to Kansas City, who didn't have a very loud offseason themselves. It was mostly quiet but they did make a big deal with the Reds, acquiring Jonathan India. They traded away Brady Singer, and getting more offense for that lineup, which is part of their problems. As they're currently constructed, they have maybe the best player in the world in Bobby Witt Jr. But after that, the lineup, falls off it. Again, they've got some promising young guys, but India looks to provide that team with a spark at the top there, and he should have fun hitting a lot of doubles. They do have Vinny Pasquantino, who came back after injury. He's a stud. But just in general, the offense is what lags behind, because the pitching led by Cole Reagans is amazing. Cole Reagans, one of the better starters in the league. They got a lot out of Michael Wacha, and we talk about offseason signings last year. We all kind of chuckled at the Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo deals when they signed him, and then Seth Lugo went out and almost won the Cy Young. So yep. I'm not sure how you felt about it as much, but I definitely remember thinking, Seth Lugo, that's a big nothing burger, for Kansas City, and they probably overpaid him. And I was wrong. I was wrong.
Well,
Kansas City's outlook this year, very similar to last year. The continued growth, much like Detroit. I expect them to continue to grow. They've swapped out a little bit of that pitching to get some help on offense, but I think very similar to last year, that they're going to continue to grow, continue to get better, and be a pain in the butt of Cleveland enough that they will be there all season. I think that these two will battle right down to the wire, and Cleveland takes the slight edge because their roster is just a little bit further along. But if Cleveland doesn't shore up things, heading into next season, and assuming that Kansas City makes the strides that we expect them to make, we could be looking at a changing of the guard come next season in the AL Central. What do you think about the Royals' prospects for this year?
Well, if you have watched this show previously, people know how much I love the Kansas City Royals. I absolutely love this team. I think they've got the best rotation in the division, led by Cole Reagans, who was my pick last year to win the Cy Young. Didn't happen. But, you go Reagans, Seth Lugo, Michael Wacha, Michael Lorenzen, and Chris Bubich. That's a pretty solid five right there. And they've got a solid bullpen. And going through, Lucas Hursak, Carlos Estevez, Chris Stratton, Sam Long. They've got guys. Salvi Perez behind the dish, dude is consummate professional. He's a guy you can't hate. I mean, Salvi Perez is the man.
Oh yeah,
he is the absolute man. You had mentioned, Vinny Pasquantino, Jonathan India as your second baseman. That was a big deal there. I mean, what more can you say about Bobby Witt Jr.? Bobby Witt's Bobby Witt. Michael Garcia at third base. MJ Melendez is one who, in the outfield, he's intriguing to me. I think he offers a lot. I think he's one that can definitely take the next step forward and really make a name for himself more than what he has already. Another piece that they got in that Jonathan India trade for Brady Singer was Joey Wiemer. Joey Wiemer, former Cincinnati Bearcat. There's potential with him. He's an outfield depth piece for him, but he's one that I think could really, could add a lot to this team just in terms of quality play. He can be a power bat, just playing wherever in the outfield. That's what he's going to offer. Kyle Isbell in center field, Hunter Renfroe, who, they've got as well. But one player that I forgot they added, and he's not listed, I don't think he's even listed here because it was a minor league deal, was Cavan Biggio. They added him on a minor league deal, and I think he balled out today in their game. But it popped up, and I saw his name pop up in one of the alerts, and I was like, oh, man, Cavan Biggio. That is a move that you want to talk about a low risk, high reward. You talk about a player who had all the hype, as part of that trio in Toronto with Bo Bichette and Vladdy Guerrero of their dads, you know, being these legendary players. And then Cavan was the one that didn't pan out, it seemed like. And then Toronto ends up dealing him to Los Angeles, and he helped. I mean, well, he doesn't really help, but he is on there when they win a World Series. Good for him. So, you bring him in on a 1-year deal, that's another depth piece that can play wherever. I like that move, but this is a team that they've got so much talent that, again, and I've said it numerous times, I freaking love the Kansas City Royals. I think there is so much that they can do. And they're another team that, they went in last year and knocked off Baltimore. Nobody thought they were going to beat Baltimore. It took 2 games just like that, and it was done. So this is a team that, they could just get in there, and who knows? Who knows what could happen? They've been there before. They've got the talent. They've got the experience. I can see them certainly competing for this AL Central division. I mean, they might lose it out, but it would not surprise me one bit if they win this division.
Yeah, they are another one of these young teams that's just fun to watch. And I mean, again, if you get a chance to watch Bobby Witt Jr., he's one of those must see players when it comes to baseball. One of those guys that makes you stop what you're doing to see his at bats. And he's not just a bat guy. He's amazing with the glove. Plays both shortstop and third base. He's at shortstop moving forward for right now, but he had played third base when he first came up. Plays both of them at a Gold Glove level. Pound for pound, if I had to start a franchise for today, he would be the first player I'd take in a draft. I think that highly of Bobby Witt Jr. as a player, and based on age, skill, talent, all of that, he's, to me, the best player in Major League Baseball right now.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. He just, from what he brings, he's the freaking man. He's so good.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's no knock on quite a few. Yeah, there's tons of guys that could vie for that title. I feel like, is the best player in the game, but I got to give the nod to Bobby because he's just he jumps off the page when you're watching Royals games. There's just something about him where it's like, oh yeah, that guy's a superstar. You don't need to see much to know how good Bobby Witt Jr. So they're lucky to have them in KC. Hopefully he stays there for a long time. I know they signed him to the long-term deal, but I mean, he's one of those guys that I would like to see stay in KC for the duration of his career. So that is.
But they're a team though that they're not afraid to go out and make moves. Like they went, to me, they went out and really, I don't want to say they bought themselves a playoff berth last year, but they made a bunch of moves that thrust them into the playoffs just in that offseason alone. So it's kind of, they made the deal, to ship out Aroldis Chapman to the Rangers. And, and that was the deal that brought in Cole Reagans, that helped the Rangers win the World Series. But to me, in terms of player wise, Kansas City came out on top, bringing in Cole Reagans, who has the potential to be the best pitcher in the American League or even in baseball. He has that potential. So, guys like that, and again, they're not afraid to make those kind of moves. For them, it was, okay, we'll deal Aroldis Chapman to you, but, this is what you're going to give us. And, they did, and look at where they are. Again, this is a team that's going to make some, they're going to make some waves this year. I really do think that. They finished, 6.5 games back of Cleveland last year. Cleveland did take a step back, but again, like we talked about previously, Cleveland's Cleveland. They seemingly just don't go away. But this Royals team, I think they're in a position to really take that next step and, like I said, and go for it and compete for this division, hands down.
Well, and you brought up them doing stuff and making moves last offseason. That reminded me, for a long time, Kansas City was very similar to the comparison was that they were the Pirates of the American League or the Pirates of the Royals of the National League, and just in that neither team spent money, and it was pretty much just perpetual rebuild and just turning over guys, trading them away as soon as their contracts were coming up. And the Royals, I think my theory is the Royals getting a taste of the World Series and winning it changed the culture and the mindset of that franchise and front office to be like, hey, it's no longer acceptable to just kind of sit here in malaise and just, have these guys and basically just not try to win, just collecting checks and collecting revenue money. And while it's not a franchise that you're necessarily going to see dominating the headlines for years at a time, it's a team that does what it needs to do, and within the last few years has made the moves to try to compete and done something. I laughed at some of the moves they made last year, but who got the last laugh? The Royals. If you scout and you believe in the players, it doesn't matter how much you pay them. What matters is the results. And the Royals got results with the guys that they brought in last year, and you're like, well, that just goes to show you that some of these teams that cry foul and say, well, we can't spend on these top level, you don't have to. You just got to do your homework and go out there and get the right guys and then put them in positions to succeed. And you can all of a sudden become the Royals. It's like the Pirates absolutely should have been doing what the Royals did last offseason, this offseason, having this young core and the limited time that they have right now on the Paul Skeens time clock. They should have been pushing everything in trying to get guys like the Royals did. So kudos to the Royals for at least attempting to run a franchise with the intention of winning games. So
that's exactly, I'm glad you said that, because I was literally going to ask you your thoughts on that, because I was going to say the same exact thing you did, that, again, they got lucky with how it played out. They made that run and they made it to the World Series, lost, then they won one and everything like that. So they got lucky with how it played out. But then that's my thing is, you don't have to get the taste of the World Series to do what they're doing.
No.
That's the frustrating part. And I'm glad that Kansas City, saw that and said, okay, now we're just going to do it this way. Because that's how you're going to succeed. And that's what was so frustrating about the Pirates. Like you hit the nail square on the head on that. What they did this offseason, criminal compared to what Kansas City has done last year and even this year. They're making moves that, they've got a couple of these young guys who are studs. So what are you going to do? All right, you know what? Let's put them in the best position to succeed as a team by bringing in guys that can play baseball. You don't have to blow the doors off of some of these players and bring in a Brinks truck for them. You don't have to, like you said. It's bringing in the right guys, doing your homework, doing the right scouting, and you go from there. And Kansas City has done a fantastic job. And I was high on them last year. I think I picked them. I might have picked them to win the division last year. I don't remember. I might have. I'll take the L on that part. But I've been so high on them just because they're not afraid to go out and make moves. They're not. And I love it because, it paid off. It paid off for them last year. I mean, good for them. And that's what other teams need to do as well.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. That's going to take us to the last team in our division preview and the last team in the American League Central, a team that took a step backwards from where they were in 2023 when they won the division and took the place of Cleveland in the playoffs, the Minnesota Twins. But it can be attributed mostly to injuries. They suffered quite a bit of injuries. Now, the usual Byron Buxton missed his amount of games. Royce Lewis, who has all the superstar potential in the world, but can't stay healthy, missed quite a bit of games. And Carlos Correa battled plantar fasciitis, but actually played pretty well, still missed some time. Just the combination of injuries and underperformance by, Pablo Lopez, who had a, damn near Cy Young year the year before. Took a giant step back last year. That didn't help. Bailey Ober's a stud, and he pitched very well for them. But they struggled to keep other guys in the rotation healthy. Joe Ryan ended the season because he strained his shoulder. Like I said, just general underperformance by Pablo Lopez. And it just seemed like Toronto or Minnesota was kind of in that spot where they couldn't get going. Like they never quite could get on a roll. They'd start playing well, and then something would happen, and then they, fall into a rut. And they just, I kept thinking that the Twins were going to go on a run and prove that the year before wasn't a fluke, but it just never kind of clicked. They ended up finishing fourth in division, not what they were looking for. They bring back mostly the same team. They didn't do a whole lot in the offseason either. It's pretty much the same. The problem is I don't think it's enough this time around, and the other teams around them, just because of, despite them not making many moves either, they got better because of their youth is just improving. Twins have some guys, and if they could stay healthy, they'd be fine. They may be able to surprise some people, but I have this team finishing probably fourth again. I'd imagine that. I just think more highly of Detroit, Cleveland, and Kansas City, and so since somebody has to finish fourth, I'm picking Minnesota to finish just above the White Sox in this division. So
yeah, they finished 82 and 80 last year. They were 10.5 games back, and this is another team. They kind of remind me a little bit of the Cincinnati Reds with their mentality on, well, we're not going to do anything because we're going to let these guys get healthy, or, just by them coming back is going to be enough. Usually that's not the case. And you got to make some moves, but I'm not going to completely crap all over them for it, because the guys that will be coming back, and if they do stay healthy, which is a big if, because the guys that you listed, Scott, are, it seems like they're like a mash unit each and every year. And and they're not guys that are, just some guys. No, they're like studs on this team that are seemingly hurt each and every season. So I don't want to crap all over them for not, making any moves because of that. But you also gotta do what you can to, again, like we say, help supplement and provide depth. And I just don't think they did enough this year. But again, going through the depth chart of this team, it's like, Ty France is a guy they brought in, I want to say, on a 1-year deal this year.
Yeah, they did. That was just a recent.
That was
weekend, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was actually the 11th. So
was it?
That was the last.
Wow,
that was the last big free agent move. They brought in Harrison Bader as an outfield piece. So that's, I can live with that, guys like that. But you see these names, and you named them off, and it's like, holy cow! And you just haven't seen anything from them, and that's a frustrating part. It's like Royce Lewis. How big of a stud he is. Byron Buxton, how big of a stud he is. Nothing. It's like they can't seem to get out of their own way injury-wise. And it sucks, because this is a team that, on paper is not 82 and 80. They're just not. They've got a phenomenal pitching staff. Like you said, led by Pablo Lopez. Bailey Ober, you said, fantastic. Simeon Woods Richardson, Chris Paddock. These guys you're naming off are, solid, solid players, and they just seemingly are stuck in neutral. And I don't know if it's one of those situations where, a move here and there could really, take them to the next step. But you thought that was going to be the case when they signed Carlos Correa.
Yeah.
Who, he was one of the big fish in that free agent market that year, and Minnesota brings him in, and hasn't panned out like they had thought. So again, I just don't think they have enough to really make any heavy forward progress in this division, unfortunately.
Yeah, it just the other teams got better and they kind of just stayed the same, and that's going to be
Yeah.
their downfall is that they needed to do something to keep up with at least the Tigers and the Royals, or at least get back on equal footing with them since they kind of took a step back. And by not doing anything, and those teams, even if they were smaller moves by the other two teams, they did something. So I think Minnesota will just be kind of hanging around in the Central Division. Again, they've got some guys. They're talented enough in finishing 82 and 80. That means that you're winning more than half your games. So it's not as if they're completely talented and unwatchable or anywhere near a rebuild. It's just if they can't stay healthy, they got no shot. And they just have a lot of guys who the propensity is that they're just injured. They just are. And it's unfortunate because they're guys that have all the talent. Lord Royce Lewis, first round pick, Byron Buxton, first overall pick at one point, and their bodies just fail them every single year. They don't play more than in Royce Lewis's case, he has never played a full season. And
which is stunning.
In Buxton's case, he's only played like one full season. It's wild, but that's the nature of the beast sometimes.
Yeah.
And when you have a collection of those type of guys, the results end up being pretty boom or bust. And again, these are just guys that at this point, there's no. I mean, I still have faith that Royce can turn it around as far as being an injury bug because
he's young enough.
Yeah, he's younger, but the unfortunately the Byron Buxton ship has sailed. He is who he is, and you can't count on him for any more than max 100 games.
If all goes well and they stay healthy, and that's a huge if, but fantasy land. True. What's this team ceiling?
I think this team's ceiling, if they stay healthy and play, I think that they could finish second in the division. I think they're good enough to beat out both Detroit and Kansas City. If all things were equal and everybody stayed healthy for all the three teams, I think that they're on paper maybe the second best team in the division. I just don't think that that's how it's going to end up because they just didn't do quite enough, and we know they won't stay healthy. So I have them finishing fourth, but again, it's more due to what the other teams did and what they didn't do. So
I can see them actually. Sorry to cut you off. I can.
No, you're good. You're good.
Ceiling wise, honestly, I was kind of sitting there thinking. I was thinking second when I asked you, but I'm looking at it and I'm like, you know what? I think they could win the division if they stay with the talent they've got.
I mean, if all things broke correctly, yeah. I mean, I don't think that Cleveland is super. This division is very tightly packed when it comes.
It's a 4-horse race. It is.
Yeah, I mean, Cleveland is by far the best team, but they're not so far and away the best that the other three can't, have no shot. And we're not talking about, well, it's the Dodgers and then everybody else in the division. And, maybe the Diamondbacks have a shot, if everything breaks right. It's not like that. This is a division that is just like, well, yeah, I could talk myself into the Twins. It's like on day one, the only team in that division that doesn't have a shot at anything is Chicago.
Yeah. I mean, let's be real. Cleveland is like 1 or 2 injuries away from being in fourth place. Like that's how this division, that's how tight it is.
And again, if their offense does take an even bigger step back than we're thinking, then again, all the pitching in the world isn't going to save you if you can't score runs. So
exactly. Yep.
They could run into problems of their own. They're not invincible, but I mean, just to kind of wrap things up, what are your final standings going to be? Like, what do you have the Central Division shaking out at the end?
I was going to go with Cleveland, but you know what? For shits and giggles, I'm going Kansas City. I'm taking Kansas City to win the division. I talked myself into it. I picked them last year. They let me down. I'm going to go again. Cleveland's going to finish second, and then Detroit, and then Minnesota, and ultimately the White Sox. Now, again, like I said, this is a 4-horse race, but it really comes down to, I think, the top 2 teams for me are Cleveland and Kansas City. Cleveland is most likely going to win this division because that's the stability factor of it. But man, damn it, I love Kansas City. I love them. I'm going to roll with them. I'm going to pick them to win the division because why not? So, final standings for me: Kansas City, Cleveland, Detroit, Minnesota, and Chicago.
And I am going to kind of stick with what I had kind of laid out there, despite the fact that I do think that there are 4 teams capable of winning this division. I'm going to give Cleveland a slight edge to do just that. I do like Kansas City a lot. I think that they're the number 1 contender otherwise for that spot. And then Detroit. I mean, if Detroit starts fast and can continue they're not going to be able to keep the pace that they had in the second half or in August last year when they, were just running through things and really got hot. It's an unsustainable pace of season. But if they play better earlier on, this team can easily find themselves battling for the division. Like this will be one of the divisions, I think, out of all 6 of them, I think that is the most likely to come down to the wire as far as who wins it. Like Cleveland, I think, does win it, but I think they're going to sweat, and I think they're going to be playing into the final days of September to see who ultimately wins this division. And Detroit's going to be in that conversation. I think they get edged out, but I do think that they're going to be a force to be reckoned with this year. So I got Cleveland, Kansas City, Detroit, Minnesota. Again, could win the division. I expect them to finish 4th, and then Chicago. It's a rebuild for seemingly ever. There, they aren't winning anything anytime soon. So, yeah. Cleveland, Kansas City, Detroit, Minnesota, and Chicago is how I have things finishing.
There we go.
And that puts a bow on our AL Central preview. Chris, did you have anything else that you wanted to discuss this week or that we needed to tell the people about before we get out of here?
No, just touching real quick on some college baseball. Xavier, we always talk about them playing, an incredibly difficult schedule. I want to say they took 2 of 3 from Liberty over the weekend, and that should have been a sweep for Xavier, but unfortunately they dropped. I want to say it was game 2. So, for Xavier again, they just continue to keep rolling with the difficult schedule. The Cincinnati Bearcats, who made history by their first ever ranking in based off of D1 baseball, they moved up to number 23. They are out in UNLV right now. They've taken 2 of 3. They play game 4 tonight at 9:05. So actually, it's getting underway now. So, but Cincinnati's taken 2 of 3 so far. They did drop game 2 where they were walked off, but returned the favor last night by scoring. I want to say it was like 3 in the 9th to knock off UNLV. So they've taken 2 of 3. Bearcats continue to keep rolling right now. They're 4-2. Jordan Bishop's got himself one hell of a ball club in Clifton. So other than that, that's pretty much it. It's great to see college baseball ramping up like it has been. Man, baseball's back, and it feels good. High school tryouts are going on right now here in the the tri-state area. So, man, baseball's in full swing, my man. It's awesome. Absolutely awesome.
I agree. And again, we've got all the action and spring training. Things are picking up there. All the teams are underway and getting things like this. So far, so good. There's been a few dings here and there, but no major injuries, no league-altering landscape injuries. So that's good. So knock on wood. I know that there will be something that's announced or that happens here in the next few weeks that it's going to change the fortunes for somebody. But
yeah,
hopefully we can get through spring training as healthy as possible and have a much more injury-free season in 2025.
Boy, would that be nice.
It sure would be, because
That would have been us.
last year was brutal. Last year
sucked so bad.
Last year at points it was like, this just isn't fun, and not, baseball's always great, but it's not fun when all the superstars and top of the sport guys get hurt. We dealt with that a lot last year. So
we always joked with it. We're like, oh man, we started this great podcast, and here we are now. Like we're talking about some big star going down. I was like, oh.
Yeah, I really don't want to deal with that again this year. So much health to all the players out there. But that is going to do it for this edition of the Backwards K Baseball Show. We thank you guys for joining in. Much appreciated. And you can find us everywhere that you find your podcast. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. The Impact Sports Cincinnati Podcasting Network, as well as the Craft Root Sports Podcasting Network. We're always here on YouTube every Tuesday or whenever we go live, whatever day of the week that may be. You can always find any of our shows archived there. We appreciate you guys tuning in. For Chris, I am Scott. This has been Backwards K Baseball. We'll see you guys next week. Good night, everybody.